I'm 31 years old. I had been renting out my apartment for almost 3 years and had never had any serious problems with tenants. I didn't raise the rent without reason, didn't interfere in people's personal lives, and always considered myself a normal landlord. About a year ago, a young woman contacted me. Let's call her Alice. She was 26. She seemed quiet and polite, worked remotely, and immediately said she was looking for stable, long-term housing. We reached an agreement quickly, signed a contract, and for the first few months everything was perfect. She paid on time. Never complained. The neighbors had nothing bad to say about her. Then small, strange things started happening. At first, she messaged me saying she was scared to sleep alone and asked if her friend could occasionally stay over. I said it wasn't a problem as long as he wasn't living there permanently. She thanked me. After some time, I noticed that the utility bills had increased sharply. I asked if everything was okay. She replied that she had simply started working from home more. Then the downstairs neighbor casually said to me, "There are constantly different people coming and going there. I thought you turned it into a hostel." That made me uneasy, but I decided not to jump to conclusions. One day, I received a letter from the Homeowners Association. It mentioned constant noise, nighttime conflicts, and complaints from several residents. I was shocked. Alice had never complained about any issues, and I hadn't received any messages from her. I wrote to her. She replied almost immediately. She said it was a mistake, that someone must have confused her with someone else, and that she was very sensitive to noise, and would never allow something like that herself. I believed her. A week later, the police called me. They asked if I was the owner of the apartment, and whether I knew that patrols were regularly being called to that address due to domestic conflicts. My stomach dropped. I had no idea what was going on there. I went to the apartment without warning. What I saw completely changed my perception of the quiet tenant. There were at least 5 people in the apartment. 2 were sleeping directly on the floor. There were suitcases in the hallway. Several mattresses were laid out in the kitchen. Alice looked like I had interrupted a well-established operation. It turned out that she had been renting out my apartment short-term through online platforms. Without my knowledge. Without my permission. And she had been doing it for months. When I told her this was a violation of the contract, she started crying. She said she had no choice. That she was just trying to survive. And that if I evicted her, she would have nowhere to go. I gave her 2 weeks to move out. Update 1. A few days after our conversation, I started receiving strange messages. At first, I didn't immediately understand what was happening. A stranger wrote to me with a short question. "Hello, can we check in tonight after 10 p.m.? I assumed it was a mistake and replied that they must have the wrong number. The person apologized. I forgot about it. But the next day, I got another message. From a different person. With a different name. "Is the apartment available for 2 nights? There are 3 of us." That's when I started feeling anxious. I didn't reply and began searching the phone number on Google. Within minutes, I found the listing. My listing. My apartment. The same photos I had once taken for long-term rental. The description had been changed. It said it was a cozy apartment for short stays, perfect for tourists. With check-in available at any time. The price was significantly higher than what she paid me monthly. The listing was active. I refreshed the page. It was still there. I checked another platform. It was there too. Then another one. She hadn't just failed to remove the listing. She was still renting out the apartment, knowing that I knew everything. The worst part started in the evening. People began calling me. They called, messaged me, sent screenshots of their bookings, and asked why the host wasn't responding. Some were angry. Some were confused. One person wrote that they were already standing outside the building with their suitcases. I felt real panic. In that moment, I realized the situation was completely out of control. This was no longer just a conflict between a landlord and a tenant. It was a scheme that continued to operate even after it had been exposed. I wrote to Alice. At first, she didn't respond. Then she sent a short message. "I thought you'd give me a little time." My hands were shaking as I read it. She didn't apologize. She didn't deny anything. She simply believed she had the right to make a bit more money, at my expense. That was the first time I seriously thought that those 2 weeks might turn out to be my most expensive mistake. Update 2. Move-out day came faster than I expected. I arrived early in the morning to inspect the apartment personally. Alice wasn't answering calls since morning, but I tried not to assume the worst. I still hoped the worst was over. When I opened the door, a sharp smell hit me. A mix of cheap alcohol, mustiness, and perfumes. The first thing I saw was scattered shoes in the hallway. Not one or two pairs, many. Different sizes, different styles. Like a dorm. In the living room, there were 2 extra mattresses that had never been there before. The couch was stained, the pillows had no covers. On the table were half-empty bottles, empty food containers, and crumpled receipts. I went into the kitchen, and my heart sank. Some of the dishes were simply gone. Several cabinets were empty. The microwave didn't turn on. The fridge was scratched, and the door seal had been torn off. The washing machine was missing from the bathroom. I stood in the middle of the apartment, trying to breathe evenly. I counted the missing items. The TV. The vacuum cleaner. 2 chairs. Even the curtains. Alice showed up half an hour later. No apologies. No explanations. She acted as if all of this was nothing. She said that some items had to be replaced, and others were taken by guests by mistake. When I asked how a TV could be taken by mistake, she shrugged. I told her that the security deposit wouldn't even cover half the repairs. She replied coldly, "I thought you'd just keep the deposit and calm down." In that moment, I realized that for her, this had never been a mistake or a desperate situation. It was a business. And I was just a resource. After she left, I sat on the floor in the empty bedroom and cried for the first time throughout this entire ordeal. Not because of the money, but because of the overwhelming feeling of helplessness. My home, a place I had taken care of for years, had been turned into a revolving door. That same evening, I called a technician, documented everything with photos and videos, and realized that this story wasn't over. Update 3. I thought the worst was behind me. The apartment was destroyed, the money was gone, but at least it was over. I was wrong. A few days after she moved out, I started receiving strange messages. At first, they were short, angry comments. "Are you seriously evicting people without notice? Worst landlord I've ever dealt with." I didn't immediately understand where it was coming from. Then someone sent me a link. Alice had left reviews. Not one. Dozens. On every platform where my name or the apartment address could be found. In these reviews, I was portrayed as a greedy, aggressive, heartless landlord who throws people out on the street, harasses tenants, and profits from other people's misery. She wrote as if she were the victim. She claimed that I suddenly raised the rent, that I threatened her with the police for no reason, that I had ruined her life. Some of the stories were so distorted that I began to question whether we were even talking about the same reality. The worst part was that people believed her. Strangers who had never known me sent angry messages. Some threatened to deal with me. Others advised me to check my methods. I felt like I was being publicly judged, without any right to defend myself. I tried to respond calmly. I laid out the facts. I wrote that the apartment had been illegally sublet short-term, that there was a contract violation, that I had evidence. But most people didn't want details. They wanted a simple story with a clear villain. And in that version, the villain was me. At some point, I stopped reading the messages altogether. I deleted apps. I woke up at night with anxiety, checking my phone. I dreamed about the apartment, empty, trashed, full of strangers. That was when I realized this was no longer just about money or repairs. It was an attack on my sense of safety, on my trust in people, on me. I contacted a lawyer. Not just about the property, about defamation, about a systematic online attack. The lawyer said a phrase that stuck with me. "You're not dealing with a naive tenant. You're dealing with someone who's used to applying public pressure." And that's when I understood another stage was coming. A legal one. Final update. Several months have passed since I contacted a lawyer. During this time, I learned a lot, not only legally, but personally as well. We filed a lawsuit on multiple grounds: illegal subletting, property damage, theft of belongings, and defamation. I had evidence: the contract, screenshots of listings, messages, call logs, photos and videos of the apartment's condition after she moved out. What initially seemed like my word against hers gradually formed a clear picture. The most unexpected part was discovering that I was not the only one. While preparing for court, the lawyer found several other cases with a very similar pattern. It turned out Alice had rented apartments from other landlords before, and each time the story ended with conflict, accusations, and a wave of negative reviews. Not everyone took it to court. Most people gave up. When the case finally went to hearing, she changed her tone for the first time. There were no more angry messages or public accusations. She proposed a settlement. She wanted me to withdraw the lawsuit and accept compensation that didn't even come close to covering the damages. I refused. The court proceedings didn't last long. The documents spoke for themselves. The court ruled her actions illegal, ordered her to pay compensation for the damaged property, and to officially retract the defamatory statements. The reviews began disappearing as quickly as they had once appeared. I didn't feel triumph. Only relief. The apartment is now renovated. I hesitated for a long time about renting it out again, but eventually decided to, just under different conditions. Stricter. More cautious. I no longer confuse kindness with naivety. This story cost me a lot of energy, money, and peace of mind. But it gave me something more important: a clear understanding of boundaries. And the confidence that staying silent and not making things complicated is sometimes the worst choice. And if I took one thing away from all of this, it's this: sometimes protecting yourself is the only right ending.